Good people, once again, welcome to another episode of The Deep Dive with Tranquility. This is your host, Umandla Wagambatha, Ushando Undabezit. And today we have our special guest, a friend and also a colleague, Rod Walker. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you, Manda, and thank you for inviting me onto your program.
It's a pleasure. Look, I'm looking forward to this because I know there's so much I'm also going to get, and our viewers also at home. First and foremost, please tell us who's Rod.
Rod Walker is my name, and I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. I've been in the program of recovery, and I have been sober and clean now for 38 years. And at the moment I am a counsellor, and I work here at Tranquility, and it is my calling in life. I feel that's the job I'm supposed to be doing, helping other people to get clean and to get sober.
So I just want to understand something. I think also the viewers would love to know, to say, what was the reason behind Rod experimenting maybe with drugs and alcohol, and what kept you, using even, when you realized that this was not good for you?
Okay, I think when I grew up, for reasons that I'm not exactly sure of, I can speculate, but it's not important, I had a feeling of low self-confidence. I never really felt that I fitted in with other people. I always watched other people doing things and sort of thought to myself, how do they know what to do? They're just acting so naturally. I remember as a youngster, in the age of 7 or 8, standing at school and looking at the playground and everybody playing. And I thought, how is it that they just talk to each other and they can interact? It didn't come naturally to me at all.
So you felt like you're different?
I felt very different right from the beginning, yeah.
So you had both parents at that age?
Yes, both my parents. My father was an alcoholic, and he got into the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 3 years old.
Wow. So
I can't really say that I had experience of his drinking. But what I can say is that he became obsessed with Alcoholics Anonymous and being a member. And so we really didn't have a lot of interaction with him. He was devoted to his program and recovery. So that's where it started from.
So sorry to cut you, but how did it make you feel, Rod, that you never had a close relationship with your dad?
I never really was aware of it. It's only now looking back on those times. I never had a good relationship with my father, right up until the time when I got into the fellowship and I got sober. And then we really clicked. And the last, I think, 9 years of his life, it was really good. We had a very close relationship. It was very rewarding, yeah.
Okay, so I hear you talking about, because of low self-esteem, that made you antisocial?
Not really antisocial. I kind of look at it that every person growing up, every child needs to be affirmed by their parents and told that they're good and they're clever and they're doing well and so on. And we never seem to get any of that as children. And I think my brother and I, we were always striving to try and be good enough, good enough, good enough. And the fact of the matter is, in our case, if you can't get the attention where you want it, then you start looking for attention somewhere else. And if you, I see in the fellowship a lot of clients come in and they're the best scholars at school and they do well at sport and they excel in everything they do. And it really seems to be an attempt to try and get validation from their parents. But for my brother and I, we didn't succeed that way. We went the other way. We went to be the worst in the school, the most outlawed types. We were the kind of kids that other children weren't allowed to play with. We were always in trouble.
So that's where you got your attention from, for being a troublesome.
Yeah, we were troublesome, and we had a reputation. People used to talk about the Walker brothers. Stay away from them. They're bad kids, and we flourished in that. That was our validation.
That's quite interesting, you know, because I'm sitting here thinking that there's a lot of young ones out there who are not getting validated or who are not being told how, you know, important and precious they are. And I think that same thing that happened to you could also happen to them, that they ended up looking for attention in the wrong places, the wrong things and wrong people.
Yeah, I see that very often in counseling. People are ending up, they're going to the gangsters in the neighborhood, they want to be part of the gang, they want to be, you know, the drug user or the big drinker, and that for them becomes their validation. They've got a set of friends that they, you know, feel that they belong to and that they feel needed in that environment.
So what can, in your personal experience, what impact does it have, you know, what impact does it have for kids not having a father figure in their lives?
I don't know. I always had a father figure, but he was very often absent in our family. And my mother was a avid reader. If my mother was reading a book, you could walk straight past her and out the front door, she wouldn't even know you'd gone. You know, she was just stuck in that book. So my brother and I, we played on that a lot, and we took advantage of those situations. I think another big problem in my life, looking back now, is that when I was about 12 years old, I started smoking cigarettes. And my mother, in her wisdom, sat down with us and said, listen, if you're going to smoke, you must smoke in front of us. I don't want you smoking around the back. I want to see what you're doing and all the rest. And that was a massive, massive mistake. You know, we then had permission to smoke, and we did smoke, but we didn't have money to buy cigarettes. So immediately, like addicts of today, we were in a situation where we were always on the wrong side of the law, you know. When people came to visit and when they, you know, went out of the house or into the kitchen or something, you got into their cigarette box and stole half their cigarettes because you had no other means. And we got to shoplifting cigarettes and that sort of thing. It just started off on a really bad foot. You know, had they been strict and said there's no smoking, and you know, perhaps it would not have gone that way.
Would you agree with me to say, you know, and it's a question, you know, behind the father figure, would you agree with me to say there's a difference between a dad being there physically and being there also emotionally? Sometimes you find people saying, my dad was there physically, but emotionally he wasn't there.
Yeah. Obviously, I believe that if you can be there physically and emotionally as a parent, that's a very good thing. And I have friends, and I've watched them raise their children, and I look in wonder and see the attention they pay to their children, and how they encourage them in every, you know, if they play cricket at school, then they go for cricket coaching on Saturdays. If they join the chess club, then they have extra chess lessons. People that really pay attention. And that was not the case in our family. But I also understand that there's no guidebook for how to be a good parent.
There's no manual for parenting.
Yeah, your parents, you have children, and then you've got to take up the job of trying to raise them. And if you didn't have that kind of upbringing yourself, you struggle. And I know that I didn't have that upbringing, and I also struggled with my kids. You know, they never had the encouraging kind of upbringing that I think they should have had, and they would have done much better if they did have. So it seems like it's a perpetuating problem. Passes from one generation to the next.
I think, you know, to our viewers, this is one important, you know, thing to say. We need to forgive our parents, because there is no manual, there is no parenting manual. You know, they have tried their best, they have, you know, tried to provide, but I think what you're saying gives us an opportunity to say, they have tried, you know, and it's only fair that we forgive them for some of the mistakes that they might have done. You know, so moving forward, Mr. Roth, you spoke of, you know, you getting out of control and being a rebellious child, right?
Yeah.
When did you start experimenting with substances and alcohol? In fact, substances as a whole.
With alcohol, I started quite young, about 10 or 11 years old. I had an uncle that we used to go and visit, and he used to drink whiskey, and he had his empty whiskey bottles outside the back door, and my brother and I used to pour all the drips of whiskey into one bottle and then finish them off ourselves.
Wow.
And it started then with an interest in alcohol. We didn't know why, but it seemed to be the grown-up thing to do, so we were trying to do that. And then at the age of about 16, I started using drugs. People were using drugs. At first I was frightened of drugs, but then I thought, if I want to be part of the crowd, let me join these people.
So Rod, when you started drinking, experimenting with alcohol from all those whiskeys, didn't it taste awful to you?
It did taste awful, and I wondered, what the hell did people do this for? But, when I got to 15, 16, and I could sometimes sneak a couple of beers, or we'd get alcohol from one of the other kids' parents, then I started using it. I didn't particularly like the taste.
Right.
But what I did like was the effect.
Right.
And so that's what it was all about. It was never really about the taste.
So you're looking for that
You're
thing.
looking for that thing. And, in our literature it says we are restless, irritable and discontent. And I always thought to myself, well, that describes a person when they're using drugs or alcohol. But thinking back on it, I was restless, irritable and discontent when I was 8 years old.
Right.
I used to go home at night, and my parents lived in a double-story house, and I used to sit in the windowsill of my bedroom, put a pillow behind me, and I had one foot outside the window, one inside, and in the distance I could see the town and the flashing lights going on and off, and I think, gee, there's people there and they're having fun and they're doing stuff and it's interesting, It must be great to be an adult, and poor me, I've got to go to Sunday school tomorrow and I've got to go to school, and my life was boring, but the action was out there. And I just seemed to grow up with that, always discontent with where I was. I wanted something better and something different. And that all changed when I started using drugs. Suddenly, after using, everything seemed to change.
So you found your solution?
I found the solution to my problem. And then the people I was using with all became my bosom buddies, although I only met them that afternoon. By the end of the day, you think that you've known them forever.
Best friends.
Best friends.
Only using buddies.
Yeah. And then later on, of course, I discovered that wasn't the truth. They were, also working their little schemes out, and they weren't as close as I thought they were. When the police came, they all disappeared, and you were left standing there on your own.
So what age did you discover that you actually have a serious problem with drugs or alcohol?
Well, no, that only came a lot later. At that time in my life, I believed that I found the solution to my isolation and loneliness and feelings of insecurity, and I continued to use for a long time. My growing up was punctuated by really bad things that happened to me. I was put into a correctional facility for 2 years, and I didn't behave myself there either, and I was eventually sentenced to 2 years in a reform school. So like from 16 to 19, I was locked up basically all the time. And when I got out at the age of 19, there was no stopping me. I don't think I spent one night at home for 5 years after I got out of there. I just couldn't. I got restless and I wanted to be out. I wanted to be where the action is. And the action was people that were using drugs, parties and discotheques and things we used to do in those days. And that became my purpose in life. And I still thought it was fun. It's the right thing to do. I did get a job, and I did work. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have had any money to do anything. So I did that, and when did I start thinking it became a problem? Much later on. I gave up using drugs in 1976. I got into a very serious medical condition. I was in hospital, and the doctors that were attending me didn't know what the problem was, because I worked in a job where you had to, wear a shirt and tie and a suit or a jacket and whatever. And when I arrived in the hospital, I didn't look like a drug addict. If I had my t-shirt on, my slops and jeans, they would have said, let's check this out. But they didn't. And so I didn't enlighten them on what the real problem was. But when I got out of hospital, I said, that's it, no more drugs. And I chucked everything I had out. And I didn't struggle giving up drugs, because I just carried on drinking. So instead of drugs, I used alcohol instead. And that started another journey.
But before that, you stopped using because of the medical condition?
Yeah, I was absolutely terrified. When I got to hospital, I had a blood pressure of 210 over 160, and my heart rate was 120 when I was lying down. And I really thought, I'm going to die today. My shirt was going ga-doom, ga-doom, ga-doom. I thought, this can't carry on for long. But anyway, I got through it. But that scared me to death.
And it's surprising. Why would you get surprised that you dying while using substances is part of committing suicide one day at a time?
Yeah, but you don't think it's that. You don't realize that truth at the time. And it's an experience that we get paranoid sometimes when we use, and that's exactly what happened to me on a couple of occasions. But that last one was the final straw, and I said, okay, this has got to go now. I'm going to kill myself if I carry on. And I stopped using drugs then, but I carried on drinking, and I didn't realize that drugs weren't the problem. It was any substance would do. And so 7 years later, in 1985, it got to this I got to the stage where I found that I was in exactly the same place all over again, but this time it was alcohol.
So maybe if you had to mention to us some of the things that you have lost as a result of your drinking, maybe when did you actually realize that I've reached my rock bottom now?
My rock bottom came to me in a very strange way, I believe. I don't know if it happens to other people this way, but I was only in 3 states of being. I was either drunk, or I was hungover, or I was asleep. That was it. There was no other state I was in. But in this complicated state of being, every now and then I'd get a picture of clarity in my mind. Suddenly, even if I was drunk, there would come a time when I seemed to be sober for a while, and my head was filled with the idea of, where's this going to end? What's going to happen to your job? What is going to happen to your children? And where's your marriage going to end up? And those thoughts would terrify me while they lasted, but then I'd just have another rum and coke or 10, and then they go away again. But they kept reoccurring. I believe it was God's intervention in my life, common sense forcing its way to the front of my mind. And eventually I really got frightened of where it was going and what was happening to me. So that's when the change came. What did I lose? I didn't do as well in business as I should have done. I never, fortunately, I never got fired from a job. But I made some stupid decisions in my career. Unfortunately, I had another addiction, a sex addiction, and I cheated on my wife on every opportunity that I had, which was, of the things that I really regret. I'm so ashamed of that, when I think back on the times. The AA book tells us we are, an alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. And there is no better description of me as a person whatever I wanted was what I had, and I didn't care who got hurt and who suffered. It was me, me, me all the time. And even to this day, I'm ashamed of the way I behaved. I've done the amends and I've done everything that the program suggests, but it still doesn't take away that guilt, shame and remorse. They don't affect me anymore, doesn't influence my life. But it's a good thing for me to remember. You know, we say we don't regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. I can't shut the door on it, it's part of my life. But I do regret the way that I treated other people with absolute indifference and not concern at all. I just can't believe that I was so selfish and self-centered, and I couldn't even see it myself until I got sober and started working the program.
You know what, I think I understand. You know, they say a help person always help. I mean, help people help people. You know, I think from what I'm getting from you, your upbringing and all that you had to face in life, obviously you were hurt at some point, and obviously you cannot transmit that which you do not have. And I think that's one of the things people don't understand, that if I'm not able to love myself, it becomes difficult for me to love the next person. You know, so, and you spoke of sex addiction. Right? Because I think most people have an obscure way of looking at what addiction is, you know. I remember there was a time where this other lady thought, you know, pharmaceuticals are better than the hard drugs, you know, and now you're talking about sex being addiction also, right? And somebody would say, but it's better off than alcoholics, you know, and somebody would say, gambling, it's also an addiction. So I just want to tell us more of your understanding regarding addiction.
Okay, well, for me, I used sex as a means of validating myself. You know, if I met a woman and we got together and slept together, then I can't be that bad. You know, I just pulled this chick. But the problem is, like 3 hours later or 2 hours later, I was busy with something else, and you know, going to brothels and other women. There was just never enough. And of course,
never enough.
Yeah.
So it's just like beer,
just like alcohol or just like drugs. There's never enough. And no one is ever going to be satisfying, because you're not looking to a natural relationship of being in love and having all you're looking at is feeding a need all
what
the time.
It can do for me.
Yeah, what it does for me. And, you know, it was a really bad time of my life. And I don't know how many thousands of rands I wasted in that area of my life. And I fortunately, my wife at the time was not really aware. I think she was a bit suspicious, but she wasn't really aware of how bad it was and what was going on. And I'm really grateful for that, because she was a person who didn't deserve that kind of treatment. You know, when we got married, it was Prince Charming on the white horse, and we're going to live happily ever after and raise children and play happy families. What she didn't realize is what she got was a far cry from what she had hoped she was going to get. So I'm still ashamed of myself for the way I treated her, and although she's not really aware of how bad it was, but I'm aware of it. And since, you know, doing the step work and evaluating my past, the step 4 and all the rest of it, it is just so selfish and inconsiderate and dishonest. There's not one good thing that can be said about my character in those days. It was just terrible.
You know, they say alcoholism, it's a family disease.
Yeah. That
it doesn't only affect us, but it also affects other innocent people.
Yeah.
I just want to find out from you that, you know, our girlfriends, our spouse, we put them in the position where now, you know, they get to suffer because of our behavior. But for some reason, they always hold on. You know, they're always there for us. You know, so I just want to find out if our sickness tend to be contagious and they become sick also. Because I don't understand how we are born with this is a downfall, but you're still holding on in hope that he will get better.
Yeah, it's a known fact that the partners and families of the addicted person also suffer from the disease. They are affected by it, and I just, I'm so grateful that my wife never divorced me or kicked me out the house, which she should have done. If she had been on the other foot, if she'd been the alcoholic and it would have been over long ago.
Right.
Out you go. But fortunately, she stayed with me, and when I did sober up, then she was still with me, and we carried on for a long time after that, and things got a lot better. I really believe that if an addict or an alcoholic can't get the program of recovery, then the next best thing is if you can get the family and the children into the other programs of recovery that will benefit them.
Right.
Because they also grow up damaged, and it's not surprising the way they've been treated and what they've seen in their homes and so on.
I like that. I for the fact that, there's a fellowship that helps our family to make them realize that they do not have the power to change us, but they do have the power to change how they look at us. They also need help. Tell me, Rod, do you think alcoholism is genetic?
I believe 100%. My own opinion, I believe it's genetic.
It's genetic.
My father was an alcoholic. Both my grandparents, my father's father and my mother's father, were both alcoholics. But so I definitely believe it's in the genes. That does not mean that if you have the gene, you will act on it. People react differently to these genes, in my opinion. So a person might become fanatical about exercise. He wants to do Ironman, do 2 oceans, and they're exercising all the time, getting fit. They're obsessed with it. And because of that obsession, they won't use drugs or drink, because that's not going to be healthy for them as a person wanting to stay fit. There are many obsessions that people have, and they get into it. And once something takes over your life and you can't control it anymore, then it becomes an addiction, and perhaps something needs to be done about it.
So would you agree with me to say most of the time young people or even adults will start using alcohol, and it's not like we got that from the streets, but it's because of some of the toxicness that happens in our families that we ended up looking for a solution on the outside?
I wouldn't really agree with that at all.
Okay.
I'd say you got the gene. You got it. Doesn't matter. I mean, you must know in counseling, we talk to one person that's been living on the streets under bridges and they're a drug addict and an alcoholic. And the next person's driving a fancy car with personalized number plates and all the rest of it. He's just as big a drug addict and alcoholic, and his life is wonderful compared to the other person. I don't think the circumstances don't really create an alcoholic, but they provide the reasons for a person to start looking for solutions.
The circumstances don't create an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Okay, because we obviously are born with the disease.
Yeah.
But also the environment does dictate and plays a huge role, right?
Does it? I
That's
don't
a question.
know. I just said to you, one guy lives under a bridge, homeless on the streets, and another one's driving a nice car with personalized number plates and all the rest, and his family's got all the money he could ever want, but he's also a drug addict and an alcoholic. I think what the thing is, that our solution to any problem is drugs or alcohol or one of the addictions. So when these circumstances arise that we can't handle, we automatically have a go-to place. Okay. I'm going to use that.
Oh, so the disease gives us every reason to use or to
use,
drink.
yeah. Okay. I mean, there's lots of people that have hardship in life and they don't end up drug addicts and alcoholics,
Right. Right.
managed to.
So since you speak of it being genetic, you have kids, right?
I have kids.
How would you treat them if they find themselves in the very same position of being, using and drinking?
Oh, tough question. I've had them both tested. They don't have the gene.
Okay.
Yeah. I took them for a genetic test many years ago, about 1990, I guess it was. We had a doctor in the fellowship that was doing research, and he asked the members of AA if you would mind coming for a blood test and bring your children with you. And I took my son with me, only the one at the time, and he was very unhappy. He was still playing happily in the garden. The next thing he was in hospital and they were taking blood out of him. But the test came back, I have the gene, I have it. He does not have it. So I've seen him drunk occasionally, but he's never going to be selling his clothing at the service station so he can, buy a quarter jack of cane or vodka.
So
he's never going to go to where I went.
Okay. So any suggestions to parents who are living with alcoholics and drug addicts? Parents
that are living here, well, it's a really tough question. There is an organization called Tough Love, and if you get involved with those people, they will tell you, how you should treat them, and it's to be absolutely ruthless with them. If they're using and that, you kick them out the house and all the rest. But having said that, when I looked at their program, I wondered if I would be able to do it if it was my child. Would I be able to put that sort of discipline in place?
Sometimes it's easy to say you just need to kick them out. They make it seem like it's easy to detach with love, and I'm thinking that's what also the viewers, would think. Which yes, we don't like his behavior. We don't like his behavior. We want him to change, but some of the rules that we need to put in place are difficult for us.
You see, we consider drug addiction and alcoholism as a disease. And, it's been proven that it is a disease, and therefore the medical aids pay for the treatment. So the person that's using or drinking has a disease, but they're still responsible for their behavior. That's the important thing. If the guy smashes the window in your car and steals your radio, he must get charged, he must go to jail. Because he's never going to stop doing that until he feels the consequences.
Right.
So, I lived and worked in the UK for a couple of years, and to me it amazes me that anybody ever gets sober there. They have such a great social security system that if you haven't got a job, you get a council flat or a council house, you get food stamps from the shops. I mean, if I was living in the UK, I would never have stopped using, I would have just coasted. It was the fear of where I would end up that caused me to make a move towards stopping. But if I'd lived there, I'd be dead already. Yeah.
So maybe the last one. You spoke of you being sober for 38 years.
38, yeah.
Please tell us, how did you manage to? Because I know it's easy to be sober, but sometimes it gets difficult to maintain our sobriety, to maintain the sobriety. What helped you to keep your sobriety and staying sober?
What helped me to keep drinking?
Because I'm thinking, life happened in that 38 years, right? Where sometimes maybe got you to a point where you feel like, stuff this, I'm just going to drink.
Let me just put it this way. I used and I drank.
Right.
And when it started becoming a problem, there were things that kept me using and drinking. The first was, I couldn't understand why it was that I am always the one that gets into trouble. Like 10 people from work go out for a pub lunch. At 2 o'clock, 9 people go back to the office. And one's left behind in the pub.
That's you.
And it's always me, and I'm always in trouble. I'm always the one that everybody's talking about. I said, what's wrong with me? Why can they drink and they don't drink? And now maybe the problem is it's because I mustn't drink rum and coke. I must maybe just stick to beer. And I tried every move I could think of to stop so that I could drink like everybody else. And then when I went to my very first AA meeting, that I didn't really attend of my own free will, I was somebody convinced me to come along, and I thought, okay, I'll go and have a look-see. And I made sure everybody in the meeting knew. I said, my name's Rod, and I'm not like you guys. I'm not an alcoholic. I've just come as an observer to see what you do here. And everybody just gave a little smile. But after, I was there for about half an hour, and I heard the other people share. I knew that everybody in that room knew what it was like to be like me. They had exactly the same problem. And I learned that night about the disease of alcoholism.
How did you find the fellowship? Who took you there? How did you?
There's another story. There was a guy that I bumped into, and I knew he was an AA member because my father had been his sponsor.
Oh, yes.
So I got to talking, and I said, no, well, I'm drinking quite a bit, it's worrying me, and maybe I should do something about it. And he said, come to a meeting. I said, no, I'm not that bad. And eventually I went to the meeting, and I sat there, and when I heard these people talking, I knew, people say they felt like they came home. For the first time, these are people that understand me. My wife used to call the minister from our church, and I'd be seeing me having a couple of beers and watching TV, and this guy would come in and say he thought just come over and have a chat, how's it going? What he was there because she insisted that he should talk to me about my drinking. And everything he said made sense to me, but he didn't know what it was like to be me, to be that person. So the first thing I learned is about the disease. Now I knew why it was that I was different to everybody else I knew that drank, that I couldn't stop. And then I remember I said to the guy at the meeting, I said, look, I went to that meeting on the 10th of October. I said, maybe I should come back after Christmas and New Year, because that's a big drinking time for me, Christmas and New Year. And he said to me, we only do this one day at a time. So can you stop drinking from now until you go to bed tonight? I said, sure, no, I can do that. He says, okay, you can drink tomorrow, as much as you like. And when you wake up tomorrow, you say, just for today I won't drink, but I can drink tomorrow. So I always started in the beginning, I'll drink tomorrow, but never today.
So you've been doing that for the past 38 years, just for today?
I have been doing it for the past 38 years, but I soon dropped that I'll drink tomorrow thing. But it got me through the first 6 weeks or so that I said, okay, tomorrow I'll get absolutely trashed, but today I won't drink. And that's how I managed to get to it. And I noticed after about 7 months, I was walking down the street, and I suddenly realized I hadn't thought about drinking for more than a week.
Wow.
And I didn't, I walked past bottle stores and whatever, and I hadn't been tempted to go in.
Didn't that scare you?
It was a wonderful feeling. In that moment I realized something has changed in your life, something phenomenal. And as I learned more about the program that I follow, it became more important to me, the prayer and meditation. And I heard a share the other day where a sponsor told his guy, his sponsee, he says, when you wake up in the morning, put your hands up and say to God, whatever. That's your prayer. And when you go to bed at night, you look up to God and you say, enough, when you go to sleep. And that's enough to start. Just for today, I can do it today. I won't drink today. And, of course, it's developed. The program is a program of development. You sort through prayer and meditation to improve your conscious contact with God. You do all the step works and the house cleaning, and it's an ongoing exercise. It never stops for me. So, for 38 years, 13,908 days. I've not been drinking.
What? You say that again?
13,908 days. One day at a time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right, you're truly an inspiration.
I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict.
You know, I think people, because most people think that, you know, when you have abstained from alcohol for, you know, a few months, then you can drink again like a normal person. People think that you have stopped using for a few months, then you can go back being a functional addict. But you have just told us that the recovery is an ongoing journey, that it's not an event, but it's a process.
If I keep going to meetings, I get to see what happens to all those people that think they can go back to using and drinking after a few years or a few months, and I don't want to go there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rod.
It's been a great pleasure
for being with us here. And one thing I remember is with you is that you once said to me, you don't care who knows that you're an alcoholic, as long as you don't forget.
That's the most important thing.
We wish you the best in your journey, and may the good God keep you and bless you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rod. Guys, that was our episode with Rod, and I hope you enjoyed. Till we meet again.